Let's talk about stuff. 15 years and 2 nights this week at Electric Factory here in Philadelphia. It's the Used. But first, it's Bert McCracken. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hi. Good.
So this tour, you're doing the first 2 albums. Night 1 is the self-titled, and then In Love and Death on the second night. And it's gone over huge. Like, congratulations. I know just here in Philadelphia, like, they had to put it in a bigger spot because things are going so well, and I know that that's kind of been, you know, the vibe all across the tour. How's it feel?
Amazing. It's humbling. I know that these first 2 records mean the world to people, and it's not easy to put that into words, but we truly understand how that feels because we share those stories. These first 2 records saved my life over and over and over. And what an awesome testament to the power of music. What a great celebration of 15 years and celebration of triumphs over tragedies in a way. I think that a lot of us have kind of healed from the teenage angst and a lot of the things that maybe these records were about for us. So the songs kind of translate into something that means more on a bigger level. Songs about freedom and learning from our mistakes and what it takes to deal with like the reality of life and death and the complications of love. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I had somebody say to me the other week that, you know, your first album you have like 18 years to write, essentially. And then it's huge and it's a success, and then they go, okay, now crank out another one and we'll take that next year if you don't mind. For these 2, you know, what do they mean to you separately as far as what the first one is and what part of you lives on that first one and then what the second one is?
The first one is very aggressively awkward and the angst is kind of misplaced, and the flow of the record is very up and down, and it's a lot true to those teenage years where you're kind of finding yourself, finding your place, and realizing that everything you were taught is a lie, and the world doesn't work that way. Nobody has the right to sell us such fabrications. But in that way, it's this kind of pure angst that's driven by unselfish need to be more than just the lemming that they want us to be, you know, to jump through the hoops, and starting to understand that the life is more than just the center of the universeness that we all truly kind of are sold into. Right. The record 2 is more about like dealing. I dealt with very heavy situations while I was making the record. I had a teacup chihuahua who passed away, and then first love of my life overdosed. And so for me, dealing with death through music is what the record is kind of all about. Broken, maybe abusive relationships, and be careful what you wish for kind of songs. And then what it takes to kind of move through disbelief to actualization, to anger, to, you know, actual sadness, to somehow maintaining, just somehow breathing and waking up and keeping on living. So yeah, record 2 is a very heavy emotional, and it's a bit of cathartic therapy for all of us, maybe.
We're talking to Bert McCracken. We're back here at the Electric Factory 2 nights, 2 big nights, the first 2 albums for the Used. I didn't realize until I really dug into it that angst and where that came from and kind of the position you were in when the Used first formed, and how much of that was a clash of, you know, you hear a lot about what Utah is and different ideals of what it is, and you clashed against that and against, I guess, your family in a lot of ways too, and it put you in a difficult position before any of this band even took off.
Right. I think a lot of people know what it feels like to come from a repressed area of the United States, because that's kind of sums up maybe 90% of the United States is this kind of weird, oppressed situations, and everyone has this kind of stagnant. I think it's because of a lot of these programs that were essentially set up to train us to work in factories or go to war. It's a kind of a depressing reality when you look back at like the history of public education in the United States. But on a more simple scale, I think that where we've come is always the most important part of the story. Like, learning from our mistakes defines who we are, and there's so many ways to answer that question, but I think that does it justice.
Right. I was looking, too, at all those tours when these first two albums first dropped. And you guys, like, batted for the cycle, man. It was Warped Tour and Ozfest and Taste of Chaos, and I think even the Project Revolution one was in there, too. Of those, they all have their different stories. I've talked to a bunch of Ozfest people before, and Warped Tour, people always say it's like punk rock summer camp. Is there one of those that stands kind of above the rest as a memory that you take with you throughout these 15 years?
Warped Tour special because I feel like what it was 15 years ago is kind of just this place that you could go to discover new music, and used to be very diverse and a little bit less corporate than it is now. I'm not saying Warped Tour is not still a blast, and congratulations on so many years for them, but times were also a lot simpler then, if you would probably agree, without the burdens of so many social media outlets and chains to our to things that aren't real and aren't tangible.
Right.
Discovering music was more magic back then. It wasn't about how many likes or followers or...
Yeah, you actually saw a band on stage and then went to their tent and had to buy the CD that day.
Or even like going to a record store and picking up a record that you'd never even heard of. Maybe you heard one of your favorite bands wrote about it in their thanks on their record, so you're like, I'll just buy this record.
Right.
And you listen to the whole thing, and there's like 3 songs you really love, and you learn a lot about music listening to crappy music as well. So, they all stand out. I mean, Project Revolution was insane. It was Snoop Dogg and Korn and Linkin Park and
Yes.
like Wu-Tang, Method Man, and what a wild ride. Ozfest is a little bit more on a huge scale, so you're seeing like...
Who was the big, I mean, besides Ozzy, who was the big headliner when you did Ozfest? Do you remember?
I think it was drugs and alcohol. The big headliner. That's what I remember the most, and they were awesome every day.
Right. You guys have always been, I mean, it's been the live show always, right? I mean, the music is a ton, but I mean, you don't really know the Used until you come and see a live show. And I remember when I first started seeing you around that time, around those Warped Tour days and everything, that you'd sing your face off so much that you would throw up. You're not still throwing up on stage, are you?
No, it's a marathon. This is 15 years later.
So what was the point where you're like, I gotta stop doing that?
Well, I went through a lot of voice issues, and I hardcore Used fans know I had throat surgery, and so a lot of things had to find a balance after that, you know. Those of you who've seen the shows, you know that Jeff does most of the screaming. So I know if I'm screaming to that extent, I'm not singing tomorrow.
Yeah.
But it in such a cool way. We haven't made any compromises. These songs are, the first 2 records especially. They're bigger than the 4 of us. It's as simple as that.
Sure. No, they're touchstones. And I mean, look, and that's such a cool thing about that era. And I mean, you guys have gone on tour with a bunch of those. I remember when Taking Back Sunday went through on their thing, and everybody's doing it's so weird now, because I think we're just about the same age that all those bands, when we were like 18, are all celebrating these 10-year anniversaries of things. It's crazy. It's a weird time. But there is a 15-year anniversary going on right now for the Used. 2 big shows happening at the Electric Factory this week. Bert, thanks so much, man. I appreciate the time.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Right on.